everybody, and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and we're back in Rolling Springs and Planet Coaster for our 10th episode, which is just nuts to think about. We've made it through 10 full episodes of this park, and there is a lot I've got to cover. I did a lot of work over the past week. It's been kind of nuts. There's a brand new land, touch-ups to other lands, and honestly, some of them are very, very close to complete now, which is really exciting. But let's go ahead and check them all out as we walk through the park. We're on the right-hand side of International Street right now as we're looking towards Grimsgrove and, of course, the National Park section off to our right-hand side. Did a lot of nighttime lighting, so we can do a walkthrough of that later on, but that was the main thing that I kind of touched up everywhere. Outside of course, some things in Tidewater, so let's go ahead and check those out right now, as there's a little bit of an auto save. But yeah, I finally finished up all of the fencing here, which is looking amazing. Super simplistic all the way around, but it does its job fairly well. And of course, all those areas that might be a little bit too disastrous if you get up next to it, made sure to put some chain link fencing around it as well. Speaking of which, actually, we've got to open all of these rides looking at them, because I want to get guests in this park. Now, as we make our way around and now opened Riptide Rush alongside all the other rides in the park, this little ice cream stand has been pretty much finished, not too detailed here, just a pretty simplistic brick structure kind of thrown up just to, you know, put something in this corner that gets guests to walk this way, in the game logic at least, because there was no way most guests were going to be walking on this path without something to attract their attention. As you can see, the ride is officially going around now. We're almost at, I think, like 50-something thousand pieces now, so I will apologize. Some of this just does not come out the best in certain areas, but that's just kind of where we're at, unfortunately, in terms of the park, which is kind of nuts because we've still got another half of the park to fill, so I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to finish this park so far, performance-wise. So we'll just find out when we get there, and if it gets to be, a point where we can't do anymore, oh well. But you can see, put some extra netting up, all around the ride itself, just in places I think that might be a little problematic with guest interaction. And of course, we've lined up everything up to this amazing viewpoint. Pay no attention to the shark. That doesn't exist. What are you talking about? Yeah, it's looking really just polished on the outside now. Even if it's just a simple fence around the way, it makes a huge, huge difference. Now, as we're walking up to the Boardwalk Arcade, did some extra lighting on this building. We won't really see that right now. But speaking of lighting, I finally got around to this idea of this old skyway or ski lift ride for the park that used to exist, keeping some of its supports as pretty much lighting rigs. And I've done that right here. Here's the perfect example right next to Boomerang. So actually parts of Riptide Rush and Boomerang get lit up from this tower still existing. But yeah, this would have been from one of the rides that no longer exists at the park. I thought that was a really cool idea, brought up in a stream at one point. And so I've added it in multiple places in the park. And with the older versions of this park, whenever they get made, they will feature that ride in actual use. So it'll be kind of interesting to try and get the support structures in the right spots for it. Hopefully it's not too finicky. But let's go ahead and keep walking around. Let's zoom next to Boomerang. We talked about that last episode. Up here on our lake, you can kind of get a preview of some of the things we did from this weekend. But looking over at Anaconda, there is this amazing water show from the workshop. I have now set up all the speakers as well as the lights. And we can even get that rolling if we want in the background in just a second. Here as we get an amazing view of Snoopy, Sky Ace, our Ferris wheel, with some new foliage in front of it, filling out this space with some topiaries and even some statuettes. We'll get a closer look at that in just a second. But again, this wonderful show has been placed inside the park, and this does play multiple times as it's screaming above my voice. It's kind of nuts. Yeah, this plays multiple times throughout the day. Lasts about 2 minutes 15 seconds, I think is how long it is, maybe 2 minutes 17 seconds. But it's amazing. I love everything about it. It just adds so much motion to this area, especially with the anaconda in the background. But yeah, let's go ahead and get to someplace a little bit quieter. Goodness gracious, it's so loud. But yeah, going back to that idea real quick of these old supports, there's another one of these perfectly in line with the other. Just a nice piece of lighting, and I did some more lighting in Grimm's Grove. Did not get around to finishing this building, unfortunately. That was one of the things I did not get around to. But, you know, it's kind of how it is. Hopefully we'll get there next week. But I was feeling really inspired in a different section of the park as we walk past Planet Snoopy and some of these little statuettes that I was mentioning, kind of hiding in the grass. The original idea was Snoopy topiaries would be in this area, but just did not work, unfortunately, as the shapes are just so limited. But yeah, the water show is still going on over here. And I gotta say, it's looking amazing from all angles, which I really, really love. Seeing the lake filled with something is just a nice change of pace, I think. But here we go. Here's our crossroads that we saw last episode. Lulu City on the left, Doghouse Theater, Tidewater, Planet Snoopy all to the right and behind us. Welcome to Lulu City. It's almost complete in its main stage. As there's, oh my gosh, everything's so loud. It's kind of nuts. But yeah, this is the outskirts of Lulu City right here. Oh man, we just missed the train. Goodness gracious. Yeah, there's so much movement now. There's so many things I want to talk about. There's so much just to talk about in general. As you know what, let's go back to the lake real quick. We're going all over the place. But this lake, as I said, it's nice to see something in it. Now, originally, there was a boat ride. We've talked about that a little bit in the past, especially when mentioning this boat ride right here in the distance. That was an old ship that used to dock right here and give a nice ship tour all the way around the lake. Now, that has not existed in quite some time. However, like most parks in the US, sometimes they neglect to actually take out the station for something that's just not being used. So this, unfortunately, entire area right here, as we'll get a better look from this side, has not been used in probably well over a decade, if not 2 decades. So that old boat ride that used to take tours all the way around, it's been gone for a long time. However, the park just hasn't seen the point in taking out the station because they're not going to replace the station with anything, since it's in just a weird spot unless you're literally doing a boat ride specifically. But if anything, I would consider like them using maintenance boats from this dock at this point. I will need to build one of those. But yeah, it's just, that would be its only use as of now. And in a lot of parks in the US, you will see literally just like temporary fencing in front of these things, which is crazy to me, but this is not an uncommon thing. As actually a lot of it's kind of overgrown at this point, which I wanted to, emphasize that it has not been used in a very, very long time. Now, let's go back to Lulu City real quick, because that is realistically the thing I want to cover the most. And it's something that also has not seen the light of day in a long time, but that's on purpose. This is a theming thing. As it is existing in 1882. There's a really interesting story of this ghost town called Lulu City. That's a real name, a real place. I kind of wanted to take inspiration from Calico at Knott's Berry Farm and literally take after a real ghost town. And this ghost town had its heyday specifically in the year 1882. There were silver mines that were very successful. And it only lasted maybe 5 or 6 years in total. But it was in this region of the U.S. near Grand Lake. And I think it was specifically inside of Rocky Mountain National Park, if I'm not incorrect on that. As we finally get to see some guests strolling around, which is nice to see. But out front we have the Lulu Barbecue. Yes, that's spelt in the way I was hoping. It's kind of funny how that worked out. And then, of course, a livery stable on the right-hand side. And then over farther to the right, we get this nice view of course, Roly-Poly. This kind of just maintenance slash, like, I guess it technically would be used as a break room area for employees. And speaking of employees, we have another one of our gracious employees watching this crossing with all of his might, as you can see him kicking the dirt around because the train takes forever to come back around. But I did figure taking another nod from Knott's, having these themed employees around the crossings, or at least one or two of the crossings, to ensure the safety of guests when the train is coming by at 10 miles an hour. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but the trains are stupid heavy, so yeah, we don't want anything bad happening. Speaking of the trains, here's the station. Got this clock up top. We'll see the queue on the other side in just a bit. But yeah, this is looking a lot more complete now. It's pretty simplistic all around, probably the most simple building in the area, but I am loving the way it's turned out. I mean, most train stations are when it comes to parks. Usually they're just a pretty simplistic temporary structure. Now let's go ahead and head to the other side of Lulu City to get the main attraction in view as Anaconda is doing its thing. Which, speaking of which, this takes over all the sight lines. It's kind of wild, but there's not much I can do about it, unfortunately. As we head over the crossing here, we'll get this amazing view of Tanahutu Falls. This is a real creek that leads into Grand Lake and eventually leads into the Colorado River. But this is a local creek that is pretty long. It's a couple miles long, actually, and has its own park around it, too. And I was just like, you know what? It's a local name. It makes sense. Let's use it. Let's use as many local influences as I can. And speaking of which, happy October. There is another local influence, a local horror story, actually, that I'm going to use for the park's main maze attraction for the Halloween season. So stay tuned for a Halloween episode with this park fairly soon. But yeah, super simplistic station here for the log for the log ride. Goodness gracious, the raft ride. Would have opened in the year 2000 with the tallest drop on a raft ride ever, just barely beating out the raft ride at Animal Kingdom in Florida, and was hoping to try and create a roundabout station. Did not work as well as I was hoping, and if you're curious, this is the only part I left kind of untouched right now. This is going to be an ADA entrance on the other side of the station. That's something I've seen with a couple of the Intamin raft rides out there, like Calico River Rapids, going back to Knott's Berry Farm yet again. That is how they have ADA access, as the train is finally making its way around with the fountain show going yet again in the background. It's kind of wild how loud those speakers really are, but at least you can hear it, and it draws attention for the guests from a wide range of the park. But yeah, this is looking amazing. Still have a lot to do for the raft ride itself. And I really took inspiration from Mystic River Falls for this signage, which I really like. I love that ride so much. Eventually it would have taken the record, theoretically, from this raft ride. But here on the opposite side is this saloon. Have some custom saloon doors from the workshop here. Super simplistic inside. This was actually a blueprint that I kind of modified in my own way from the workshop. Again, I have so many workshop items in this area, including that church that you just got a quick view of. But yeah, here is the entry point for the rafts. Usually gets around a 25 to 30 minute wait whenever I let guests just roam free in here. Lots of inspiration from Strawberry from Red Dead Redemption 2 for the architecture style of the buildings in this queue, and hopefully for the rest of the area. We do have some places to dry off. These family dryers have made their return. We'll see more of these, I'm sure, with the other water rides in the park. But the queue is very simplistic. Just a bunch of switchbacks on the side of that kind of downward hill. As we'll turn around again to our general wares, there is no interior to this. It's literally just a couple of souvenir shops right here, as you see one of the employees going to take their break. But yeah, super simple building. And it works really, really well, in my opinion, as we turn our way around to another one of these modified workshop pieces. This was actually from the same set as the saloon. Yeah, did a couple modifications, made it a little smaller. That was my biggest thing with this game. I want to make things smaller, so that's kind of what I did all the way around. But you can also see I added in like this shoddy representation of lockers for the raft ride. Going back to the rafts real quick, it's odd, don't get me wrong. However, this is something we would actually see in a lot of parks. Just putting down a concrete pad someplace near the ride and then putting the lockers there and just being like, yeah, if you want to make sure your stuff really doesn't get wet, just go buy a locker. And so they would kind of point around the corner if people ask, oh, where can I put my stuff if it's going to get wet? Well, just go around the corner, and then hopefully you don't trip over the random concrete pad that got put in much later on. But yeah, let's go ahead and look at some of the details, I guess, of some of this amazing little land here. Super simple all around. There are some secrets in this area once the train ride has finished and we're done building it entirely. I'll go ahead and let you in on some of them, which will be fun. But yeah, there are secrets around every corner in this town and some outlaws you gotta look out for. But as we make our way around towards the main entrance for the train station, here you go, the Rocky Mountain Railway. This, in my mind, is actually a reused railway from the actual 1800s. Like, there's going to be a big trestle bridge that, in my headcanon for the park, was already there, and they just kind of built a new railway around it to connect to it and use it as a main tourist attraction for the area. And honestly, I kind of think this is what's gonna start the park originally, is that amazing trestle bridge next to these rolling springs. And I think that's where we're gonna go with it. It's gonna be kind of amazing, if you ask me. I love having this really in-depth story and timeline for this park, which you'll get more clues and references to in future videos. But yeah, super simple queue. Finally got around to using some of these chain link pieces here, and yeah, I think it works really well. Hopefully you're not waiting out in the sun, but if you are, oh well, you got some missed fans at least. But yeah, and then it just heads straight up to the station. It's kind of funny, I only allowed 200 guests in the park, but it seems like a good chunk of them came back to the railway. Now, as we look at the railway specifically, we're on this nice little outlook. This will eventually be specifically for looking over Barnstormer. Now, we're going to change the heck out of this layout because it just does not work in this terrain, and we're also going to change the heck out of the terrain in the future. But yeah, my hope is that this B&M invert will be thriving and potentially having its station in this spot right here, and then heading up a small lift hill, going down that drop, and then going through the entire layout over the raft ride, which would be really cool, and then heading back up the lift and just kind of ending up in the station from there. But last couple updates here. We've already talked about this. This is actually Dutchtown now, and it's technically separate from Lulu City, and there's a whole kind of treacherous history when it comes to that. But yeah, it was only just a handful of families that kind of got kicked out of Lulu City. They were Dutch, and that was the reason they got kicked out. It's not exactly a great history, but taking some influence from Silver Dollar City in that, I might actually build a small dark ride going over the events of that, kind of like Fire in the Hole. Fire in the Hole does that same exact thing. There was this horrible moment in local history, but they made a dark ride out of it. So I might follow the same vein and put a dark ride entrance right here and actually have it interact potentially a little bit with the log flume. So that might be kind of cool if you ask me. But that's your entire update finished for Rolling Springs for this week. Did a lot of work. It's looking amazing if you ask me, as we'll get our last view of the train. Oh man, it looks great, filled with people. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. We've got more of these videos coming. But of course, until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.